Welcome, everyone. So happy to see you guys. Today, we are coming in from San Francisco, New York, London, Paris, and Washington, D.C. So we have the world covered today. So let's just start with a definition of circularity, and anyone can grab this, because the term has come to really encompass so many different aspects of the business. It can be reuse, resale, the rental market, and I just want to make sure that we're all sort of on the same page about what you believe circularity is.
So when we think about circularity, it's just, we try to keep it really, really simple. It's keeping items in circulation from creation all the way through end of life and back again. And it's linked to sustainability, but it's not exactly sustainability. When we think of sustainability, which has become just ubiquitous with just like being environmentally friendly, which is actually not correct. It's really just like sustaining an ecosystem over time. And you can do that through circularity. And so that's how we think about the relationship between those two words. It's just circularity really is just like, how do we keep items and materials in circulation so that they don't end up in the waste stream and that they can stay in circulation to be like a more sustainable system.
There's an idea that a lot of consumers don't really know what circularity is, and it's difficult to sort of translate that for them or to even get them to buy into the idea. And so one of the main things that we're going to discuss today is how do we best communicate that definition to the consumer so they understand what circularity is, and so they're also not getting confused with sustainability, which can often be greenwashed. So how do we communicate that best?
I think Jake did a really good job, actually, because I was thinking about that, which is that we need to just kind of cut back on the amount of jargon that we use. And I think he just explained it so clearly, just like it's a key piece in circulation. As simple as that, I think. And so many of the terms that we're using nowadays, like we talk about sustainability and circularity, but these are terms that we wouldn't have used so commonly in like a common lexicon even 10 years ago, but we expect everybody to know straight away. So I think less jargon and doing what Jake did there and just using really, really simple terms and just saying things simply, I think, is one way forward. Mm-hmm. And obviously education in schools to educate young people so they have a sense of what these things are.
I also think, to Jake's point as well, that sustainability has lost its meaning. Because I guess when I studied sustainability about 15 years ago, like we used the UN definition, thinking about sustainable development as meeting the needs of current and future generations, which is basically circularity, right? But we've changed to understand sustainability as just meaning doing less harm or doing less bad than the norm, which isn't the idea at all.
And I think we're at a time where we're in danger of doing the same to the word circularity. So it's almost like circularity is kind of just morphed with the word sustainability. And I think that's where we can get in a lot of trouble. And for when consumers are thinking about circularity, it's important to understand when brands are saying they're circular, what does that actually mean? When in reality, I think a lot of brands are doing a lot of good to be more circular. I think like creating full circularity is incredibly challenging. There's some amazing brands that are leading the charge, like Thousand Fell. But it's great that brands are being more circular. And that's where we work with brands, just as how can you be more circular, more sustainable, and eventually, hopefully reach a point where we can say it's a circular supply chain.
Jake, I'd never heard you define circularity before, and I love it. So I'm going to need you to do it again so I can write it down.
You can feel it.
But somebody, I didn't come up with this, somebody very smart that I respect a lot actually talks about it very similarly to how you do, but also this idea of value. So if we're thinking, Deanna, about teaching kids or teaching consumers about like what is circularity, it's how do you keep value in an item or in a fiber as long as possible? And so rather than treating clothes as really cheap consumables that you can just throw away and get new and like do these big clothing hauls every season, and then the old clothes go in a box and get like wish cycled at Goodwill, how do you start to look at clothing as an asset or even fiber and learn like that anything you're wearing, like this is 100% cotton sweatshirt, this fiber has some value, even at end of life, and how do we keep value in that fiber or that item of clothing as long as possible, and whether that's resale and rewearing it as many times as possible, or it's like end of life circularity and recycling, and then recycling that fiber to the next best value stream. And that was just an interesting concept for me, and something that's really helped us in thinking about also the mechanisms that will power circularity regarding value and dollars and incentivization. But yeah, so again, agreed, it needs to be simple. And we are also at risk of diluting the word circularity, because there are now circular brands. We're not calling anybody out, but there are brands that are advertising themselves as circular, putting out products that are circular solely because they have quote unquote circular design principles. And that is a risk maybe we'll talk about today, but just designing for circularity, in my opinion, does not mean that you are yet circular. It's not bad, but it's a little bit like that, doing less bad than we were before. But part of circularity to me and to our team and to our brand is also figuring out how to take accountability for waste, and like how to be there at end of life or at the resale stage, and actually helping that fiber, that item, find a second life.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that you really talk about value, and this is a question that I have for Dr. Dion, is that we have in this linear system, it's like an economic force and it's also a psychological force, but it doesn't really seem to make people happier because there is no value in something long term, and you're always trying to get that next Instagram outfit or the next quick thing. So it's just sort of, and this is your specialty, why do we do this, or why do consumers do that, and what is the psychology behind constantly consuming and not holding value for something for a long time? Like why are consumers trapped in this cycle?
Yeah, gosh, I think it's an important question, isn't it? But it's a big one, and there's so many. I think there's not one answer. There's like multiple things that are working together that are all compounding to create this kind of like toxic, muddled system. And I think one thing that sprung to mind was thinking about the fact that, it's as you were saying here, Chloe, about, the value in clothing. How do you begin to place value in an item that you spend so little time with? Because if there's like 52 micro trends a year, and you're continuously, wearing something for one night, Instagramming it and then throwing it away, you're not going to place any value in that. But I think maybe a simple answer about this kind of continuous need for newness is, that it's addictive in one sense, because I guess we are a society of consumers, and each time we search for something online or in store and we buy something new, then the little neurotransmitters in our brains, they go mad and release these chemicals that kind of give us these feelings of pleasure. And you literally become addicted to that, because the brain says, hey, that thing you did before, that felt good, do that again. But the issue is that once you search for something and you buy it, then they found that the neurotransmitters and the amounts of kind of feel-good hormones released in the brain, they drop off really quickly. So it doesn't sustain you as a hit. But then there's also the kind of like, that's thinking on the individualistic level, but we also live in a society that, I guess, where consumerism is very central. So in terms of people being able to feel they fit in, being able to connect, then they use shopping this way to look like their peers, to do what their peers are doing. We look to each other for the social norms. We use our kind of like our social reference groups, and we look around and say, okay, what are they doing? That means it's what I should be doing. And it's really hard for people to get out of that, because these are our social norms right now. And I guess they're going to continue to be until we kind of somehow create a new norm or an alternative norm, which I think all of the people here on this call are doing in some way. And I think at the moment, also, we live in a society where social esteem is linked to our buying power and our ability to have, and for many people to kind of like show what we have, maybe through hauls on social media. So there's so many things that I think are confounding and working together that are keeping us continuously buying and thinking we have to buy and have new, which is not obviously the case, but it's very tricky to break that cycle, I would say.
How are you all feeling? I mean, we're sort of post-COVID, and there was a lot of talk during the pandemic, I think, about this was a time for change, and this is going to be a sort of a watershed moment for sustainability and for circularity. But then people came back and have this idea of revenge shopping. Do you feel like now is a really good opportunity to communicate more with consumers and actually make a change? Or do you feel like people have sort of bounced back to exactly where they were before?
I'm actually like really optimistic that there's been like a paradigm shift within the consumer base. Like maybe looking at this just kind of through the lens of the US market, but what we sort of saw pre-pandemic when talking to even like friends, but like a larger consumer base, like, hey, why don't you shop sustainable? The answer was, well, I'm only one person. Like, what can I really do? And so then they would walk into a fast fashion shop, and, just buy new clothing. And what I saw over the pandemic was that there was this massive like collective trauma where the message was individual action can actually lead to meaningful social change. And then that was very quickly followed up on the heels of like a very large social justice movement that's happened and is still kind of happening in the United States, where people realized that their individual voice, actually mattered, and it could lead to this kind of big systemic change. And I'm not hearing that answer from people anymore. I'm not hearing like, oh, I'm only one person. And that's not to say that like people aren't shopping. And I don't necessarily think that might have curbed consumerism, but I do think it's fueled this sort of conscious shopping. And we're seeing that kind of across the board. We're seeing that in the brands that people are buying. We're also seeing that in the way and sort of the garments that they're buying, whether it's secondhand or otherwise. Like, I was in, East Village 3 weeks ago, and like the vintage shopping was crazy, like mobbed. And like 10 years ago, I don't think that would have happened, right? Or even like 3 years ago, I don't think that would have happened. I think it was like cool and niche, and now it's like becoming very mainstream. And so this idea of shopping and having kind of that buying power and that ability to make changes,
or having the brand you wear reflect your values,
that's right,
is a little more common. But I don't think that, I also have seen flip side that the fast growth of thrift hasn't necessarily curbed the growth of fast fashion. So Dion, you might have a different perspective there.
No, I kind of agree with both of you a little bit. I think we saw that here as well. I felt like with the lockdown and the pandemic, it kind of got people to pause for a moment in a way that we aren't able to ourselves unless it's forced upon us, it seems. And like you were at home and you learned the fact that, oh, I can wear the same thing a couple of days in a row and the world does not implode. Oh, isn't that interesting? And I think giving people, it's almost like we got forced into cold turkey in a way. And I think that putting people in that position allowed them to reflect on their practices around clothing and to realize, hang on a minute, I can wear the same thing. I'm not wearing hardly anything in my wardrobe, to engage a lot more mindfully, perhaps, with some of the literature out there around environmentalism, sustainability, circular, all these things. I think it just gave us a chance to pause and really consider ourselves. Yeah.
And taking that a step further, I feel like you, Dion, and Stuart and Chloe did a great job of talking about the consumer and conscious consumers and how they've been thinking about sustainability during pandemic, post-pandemic, which has actually really fueled brands' desire to change. And so we talk to brands all day long about what they want to do now to be more sustainable because their customers are demanding it. And so now brands that have been around, some of them have been around 50 to 100 years, others that are just starting out, are recognizing the importance of meeting their customers where they are because their customers are demanding it, which has also fueled this other wave of sustainable tech and eco tech, or whatever you want to call it, which I think Treet falls under, which is how do we all help brands with this monumental shift to help them be more sustainable so that they can actually continue reaching their customers, so that their customers can look to the brands and say, hey, they actually are making changes. They are offering resale or recycle or take back programs. They're making these shifts so that they can, they can take my dollars because I want to invest and wear clothing that also identifies with my, with my values.
Sort of perfectly leads into my next question, which is for Kathleen. So I noticed that on the Tentree website, you guys say, we're just asking you to be a little more aware of what you're paying for and we'll do the rest. So do you actually find that customers are proactive in seeking out this brand, or do you find that they like the brand and then they're like, well, great, this is a value add? So what is the perspective of the consumer for you?
I think if consumers don't like the product, they're not going to buy it. So ultimately, I think it has to start with a good product or a product that appeals. So I think for brands, the challenge is to make sure that we have a product that appeals and it embodies a sustainable mission. But those that come to us, I really do feel that our customers have a loyalty to the brand because they really feel that they're doing something different. And Tentree, we plant 10 trees for every item of clothing sold. And customers come to us and say they're proud of their forest. We've also created a sister company called Tree, which is a blockchain-enabled ground-based monitoring system for trees. So we've done that because we want to ensure that the impact is real. You know, Tentree has been operating for, say, 10 years, and that's a lot of trees. It's 77 million and counting, but we have to make sure it's a data-driven system. So I think our customers are really into the idea of planting trees, but as a brand, I think we need to step up as well as having, you know, sustainable materials. We need to look at our processes, and it's not enough to have something external to our value chain. And I think that's where circularity really comes in, because, you know, that's something that has been missing, and we're just starting on our circularity journey now.
Once they get into your ecosystem, do you find that they then want to buy more trees or to participate in different ways, and because they are so backing the brand?
Yeah, I mean, we offer some climate positive programs. So you can, at the point of purchase, you can add more trees to your bag. And because we have Treet, we have an impact wallet. So you can see where your trees have been planted, and it's, you know, for example, we have agroforestry in Senegal, and for food security, we have in Indonesia, we're supporting projects for mangrove restoration for coastal erosion. We're looking at planting in Peru for water conservation. So in the impact wallet, you can see, you know, whether you're supporting water or food or biodiversity. And I think customers have, you know, we've heard so many positive things about the impact wallet and how they feel closer to the brand and more engaged with the brand, because our mission is to try and make saving the planet simple. And I think the tree planting and the restoration is one part of it, but I think now we're moving into thinking about restorative systems. And I think that's where circularity really fits in. You know, we have restoration, which is restoring land, and we're participating in, we're planting trees in our cotton fields in India, and we have regenerative agroforestry projects that we're setting up in Tanzania. But I think thinking of restoration, not just about tree planting, but thinking about it as the whole system, the whole ecosystem, I think is really important. And that's where I think this circularity journey really comes in.
No, it's amazing. And it's great that you speak about actually having data, because you know, people obviously greenwash so many things, you can say anything. So it's nice that you know, have the numbers there to back it up. It's good from a consumer perspective. So maybe Chloe or Stuart, do you have any, you touched a little bit on this, but like, what are the main barriers, if there are any, to having consumers choose circular products?
I don't think there's a ton of barriers to having consumers choose circular products. I mean, there's a couple of like issues with marketing circularity, in that it's becoming more mainstream and understood, but it was definitely, particularly 2.5 years ago, a challenge for us to explain the benefits of a recyclable product or a circular product, particularly in the current marketing mechanisms that are like 10-second ads, and what you put in the first second is the only thing that matters. So storytelling around circularity and recycling and returns and take back programs has actually increased exponentially, and customers' understanding has increased. So that's kind of, you know, an evolution of the market over the last 2 years. I mean, it's some of the same barriers though to all quote unquote sustainable products or sustainable fashion or ethical or regenerative fashion. It's expensive. So there's a cost and a margin involved in creating products that are actually ethically made with respect to labor, the right fiber inputs, the right design details. So items that actually can be taken apart for recycling. Like we have a fairly high LOP, which is labor, overhead, and profit costs in our sneaker. And a lot of that's because of the way that we construct the sneaker, and it's not constructed with normal cements and normal glues. And, you know, there's a little bit more labor intensive with the way that it has to be sewn, so it can be pulled apart. And that creates a more expensive sneaker. So instead of being able to sell it for $75, $80, it's just over $100, $120 to $130, which then for some people can be cost prohibitive. And so I think, where am I going with this? I think, you know, that might be one of the hardest barriers in getting customers to choose circular products, is kind of explaining the need and the overall system to them to shop this way, to shop circular, shop sustainable, and justify what could be, you know, a 30, 40 or 2x increase in 30-40% increase or 2x increase in price. And helping them to see that value versus some of the larger mass brands where they can get the same style, the same trend for far less. But then I think on the flip side, the other thing that we're really working on now is how do you get consumers to actually engage in these take back programs? So when a brand like $1,000 brand like Tentree launches a take back program, be it for resale or recycling, the next maneuver is not only how do you get them to buy the product in the first place, but then how do you get them to engage with that take back program and participate and be excited about resale or recycling? And we've been really successful with that with $1,000. We've had over 50% of people who purchased in our first year come back and recycle with the brand, which is just, a really incredible number. And, as we've scaled, we've been able to keep it to about 30%. And, we're kind of looking at a 12-month look back. We've only been in market for 2 years. So hopefully that number continues to grow, but that is with a brand that's fully about circularity. And from the beginning, everything on the box, that this is a recyclable shoe. So how do you take that and copy that onto a larger brand like Tentree? And how do you actually get, 5% or 10% of consumers to actually think about sending back their clothes when they're done with them? And so that behavior change is kind of interesting, kind of the next, I guess, barrier or challenge for circularity.
Chloe, I have a follow-up question.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, Rhonda. And that's with the challenge of price being an issue, and totally understand when you create a more sustainable product out of more expensive materials, the price goes up to 100, 120, 130. Have you found that you're able to help justify that price difference by customers understanding that they can send it back for credit afterwards? So that
Great
they can,
question.
Yeah. So how do we justify that? How can we actually work? Yeah.
It's one of Stuart's favorite things. If you go to the we're redoing the $1,000 website. So, look at it with I guess a nice eye. But we're now messaging price as $100 sneaker plus a $20 material credit. That's what we're calling it. We've just said a few names. And we did that through a series of 3 different A/B tests where we ran traffic kind of equally to 2 versions of the website. One that just showed the sneaker at its normal $120 price, and one that showed the sneaker at $100 plus the $20 material credit that you will get back one day when you recycle. And we had a 50, depending on the test, 50 to 70% increase in conversion on those PDP pages. So it's a very powerful message. Actually, it has been a very powerful message for us, teaching consumers at point of purchase, hey, this isn't just any sort of normal sneaker, and it's not just $120. Like, you're actually putting $20 into a credit for future purchases and paying into this recycling system from day one. And it's been pretty exciting to see that resonate with customers so well. And then, did you want to speak about or add anything to that?
No, I think that's great. I mean, I think the exciting thing and the way that we sort of rationalize it, and Dan, maybe you can speak to this better than I can, but it's this idea of like this unrealized gain that you have, and people get really excited about that. Like they feel like, and they feel like they've earned that credit, which is really great. And so like the CX experience for us too has like really centered around like surprise and delight around that. And I also think the other thing that it does, and Jake, I'm sure you kind of experienced something similar, is that you're turning oftentimes that moment where customers are the least in love with their product into this new celebrated like high with their product, right? It's like you personally might be the least in love with wearing it, but like, wow, there's this second wave of like, there's value here. I get something back for it. I feel really good about that.
It's not just old and last year's news anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think that's probably the magic formula for turning a consumable item into an asset. Like, and maybe Dion, you can speak to this too, is just like this idea of how to, like, from the beginning, you realize that it is an asset that you can return. So you're not going to consume it, and you get to like delight yourself at the end of it. The more that brands can do that, I feel like that could help switch the mindset.
My psychological response to that is when you were talking about, you've fallen out of love with the product, but you've got this thing coming up that you can look forward to. Maybe think about something called the peak end rule, that, as you're getting excited about something, you kind of go up in terms of excitement and pleasure, and then you get the thing, you're really excited, and then it tails off towards the end. But with your product, it kind of goes up, but it's going to come up again because they've got something else to look forward to because they've got this 20% recycling. But also my non-psychological point was I've got awful attention skills. So I was looking at your website and it is lovely and I love these socks on it. And I really can see the way you've broken it down with the $100 for the trainer and the $20 recycling for us. I think it's fantastic. It's very transparent and it's really good.
Yeah, it's a really different way to frame the position because I was going to ask this a little bit later, but since we're on the topic, like other brands or other like large fast fashion brands now have that, you know, they have a dumpster sort of with you get €5 in return if you throw your clothes in there. And I don't know if that's communicating to consumers because they put it in there for the credit and those clothes might not even be able to be recycled or they may be dumped. And I think that there's something probably missing in that communication link, but the brands are doing it to like jump on the bandwagon in a way. So I think the way that you guys are communicating it as a value later on is really making the point to the consumer that this is something that has an environmental impact that they might not get otherwise. So anyway. Jake, I know that you guys are working on building up these other brands. So how do you make the case to brands that it's in their business interest to take on the additional labor, maybe of bringing things back or to have these garments in a circular system? Do you feel any resistance when you're talking to other companies and trying to get them to participate in these kinds of programs?
Yeah, I think one important lesson we learned early on is that brands are businesses. They're businesses first. They have to operate as a business and they have to operate with, make business decisions that are in the best interest of their bottom line at the end of the day and that aren't going to lose them money. And so it's really important to us as we're building Treet to understand that from the beginning so that we can build resale experiences for brands in a way that was profitable as soon as possible, especially when we're working with brands with hundreds of employees, but also brands with like dozens or 2 employees. The same sort of model that we're doing with resale and working with partners to help reduce those costs is really evident. And it's the same depending on the types of brands that we're working with. And so it's really about proving how resale can actually lead to revenue gains for the brands, but not just revenue gains. We're really thinking about resale, trying to also very much simplify it as like, it'll help brands be more sustainable by keeping items out of the landfill. Extending the life of an item is one of the best ways to reduce its carbon footprint over time. So on one hand, we have sustainability for the sustainability managers out there like Kathleen. And then on the other hand, we have customer loyalty and customer lifetime value. So how can we get customers to fall in love with the brand even more and have them keep coming back to the brand to shop again? And so that's where resale is really the hack, that kind of like the white knight, to just actually come in and do both things really well for brands in a profitable way. And so it's really about explaining that to brands, to the fact that you can have your cake and eat it too. You can do things that are more sustainable, that are actually in the best interest of your customers and the bottom line of the business. So we're at the beginning of that journey with brands. I think in the last year, resale has really taken off for brands, but it's still like in the 0.01% of brands that are doing resale, even though it has basically 10x since the year before. So there's still a long road to go for actually proving out that value, understanding what those models are, and then sharing that data back with new brands so that they can understand what resale can do for their business.
Do you see people looking for specific financial goalposts, or are they just open to the idea of any sort of change?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the brand. Some brands are doing resale just for the sole reason that it's the right thing to do for their brand and to be more sustainable. And so especially the first wave of brands that are adopting resale were the brands that were more sustainable to begin with. And they even oftentimes like counted sustainability as a pillar of their brand. Brands like Boyish Jeans, who we've launched with, like a sustainable denim brand, and lots of other brands that we're working with. But we're also starting to see that shift a little bit. So it's, for some brands, it's not the first pillar, and what they're looking at is the number of new customers that they're able to get through resale. So a lot of brands are looking at, all right, what's the % of new shoppers I'm able to reach by having a resale arm? Because these items, I'm now able to offer them at a lesser price point. I'm able to reach a younger shopper that might be more environmentally friendly or price conscious. And because of that, actually, a pretty big percentage of shoppers on Treet are new to brands. So about 42% of shoppers are new to the brands. So they're looking at this as an acquisition strategy. And then the other numbers are, I mean, pretty obvious. It's just like the number of items being bought and sold that are used and the amount of customers they're reaching. And then of course, the amount of revenue that they're gaining through participating in resale. Because nowadays, you know, you're not only able to participate when you sell an item once, you can participate when it sells the second, third, and fourth time. And then those new customers are coming back to your site. And so it's very clearly like it's a revenue gain and how percent of new customers. And I think still most importantly, it's just sustainability. How many items are we diverting from landfills, and what can we actually show the brands in terms of the impact they're making by encouraging their customers to sell secondhand.
So for Tentree or Thousand Fell, do you find, like, I mean, when we talk a little bit about value, we talk about resale value, you know, I think there's a lot of value on the high end. People will buy into a Chanel bag and eventually that will go up in value and be able to be resold multiple times if they choose to. But do you find that maybe it's difficult to make that case for more basic items, or do you feel that consumers are really responsive on all levels?
And I guess I can jump in from the Tentree side. We're just rolling out a new system that I think we'll talk about later. And I think, you know, to Jake's point about sustainability, I think if it's a sustainable brand, consumers will be asking for this. And I've had potential customers email me, talk to me and say, I love what you do at Tentree, but you don't have resale. So, you know, I don't buy from you, because there's a whole new generation, Gen Z, that maybe only buy resale or only thrift, you know. So I think when sustainability is a core pillar of your brand, then it's not necessarily just an economic question about that. But, you know, I think one of the key things that I'm excited about is, you know, Chloe was talking earlier about designing for circularity, but I think if you have a system in place, you can really design for circularity, because you can have that data coming back and you can make data-driven design for circularity. You'll know what percentage is being recycled. You'll know how durable your clothing is, which one's going to resell, which ones end up in recycling, what percentage can't be recycled. And that's something that our designers have never had the information on. They've never had that kind of data to work with. So I think there's huge opportunities there. And, you know, Jake talked about the customer acquisition, which is huge. And there's also the loyalty, but thinking about the new systems that are created through recycled feedstock, that you will have access to new materials where you'll really be able to close the loop. I think there's so much exciting opportunities through creating a circularity infrastructure that needs to be emphasized when you're in that conversation about how could this ultimately change your brand.
Interesting. Like Chloe or Stuart or Dr. Dion, so as Kathleen just mentioned, there's a whole generation that are maybe just thrifting. Do you see a generational shift in your consumers, or the people coming to the brand being really young and really searching this out? Or Dr. Dion, do you see sort of a psychological shift in this younger generation just really being devoted to these issues?
Yeah, 45% of our customer base is 18 to 24. And 70% of our customer base is below the age of 29. So it is a younger consumer. We say it's a younger millennial and older Gen Z or Zillennial audience. It's like the shoe's a little expensive. So we're working on some lower price point products that could, really target high school age, et cetera. But the first time you have money, your discretionary income, your first job, you're in college, you have a job, and all of a sudden you can start to put that behind a brand that you're interested in. And so definitely is a younger audience for sure.
I think from talking with my students, I think the things that I know when I was younger and I was in school that I took for granted, they just kind of don't. They think a lot more deeply, I think, about literally where their clothes are coming from, how they're being made, the impact that they have in their environment. And they're just thinking about their clothing and the way they interact differently, and it's really exciting, and it makes you feel like, oh gosh, like you're quite late to the game yourself. And it feels like as I said earlier about the way to kind of change the system is by kind of creating new norms. And I think that's what we're seeing, especially like we said with your client base there being mostly on 24, that for them, if this is what all their friends are doing, and this is the new norm, then that's the way to kind of break these kind of maladaptive systems that we have at the moment. And hopefully keep shifting that way.
I mean, it's amazing that you're working on these educational programs to really help these young people not only understand the systems, but also to change them, and which is something that's been so lacking in the education system, at least in the States where I grew up. Like all of that, I often think back, like, you know, our grandparents, they had home economics classes where they learned how to sew and take care of things, and we just lost all that. So it's nice to see that those kinds of things are coming back. And also, it's like, I think we're maybe at this moment where a lot of people are talking about being concerned about the environment, but then maybe not making those choices. Do you, Dr. Dion, find any, is there like a contradiction sometimes in consumers that want to do the right thing, but then turn out not to actually follow through? Or is there any sort of way to get past that?
I feel sorry for consumers a little bit. They're, you know, like I said, they're stuck in this habit. Their brains tell them buy. Social media telling them buy. Every advert is here in London on the side of a bus is telling you to buy in the tube station. But so you're constantly fighting all these messages and being told, but then you know this is impacting the environment and all these other messages. And I think what you might see in people who are aware of the impact and aware of the alternatives, like, you know, buying from a circular company, that is that they kind of experience a little bit of cognitive dissonance, which I'm sure you know what that is anyway. It's like when you're holding two contradictory views in mind at the same time. So you maybe you're online or in your favorite store, and you're kind of saying, oh, I really want to buy this new outfit, but I know this is not the most sustainable brand. I've seen some stuff in the media about what they're getting up to in factories in Bangladesh, blah, blah. But then you go, oh, but I've had a really tough week at work. And I think I look really cute in this dress. So people are really torn between doing something that immediately makes them feel good and something that in the long term is good. And I think they really struggle with that. And what they'll do sometimes is you'll make up an excuse in your mind to justify that, because you can't hold those two thoughts for a long time. You'll kind of say to yourself, well, I'm only buying one thing. I'm not doing a haul shop like some people do. Oh, well, this shop, you know, it's not ultra fast fashion, it's just fast fashion, so it's not as bad. So you start to justify to kind of bin off one of those feelings that are causing you discomfort. So I think that's one thing. I think people are aware, but maybe they are just sat with this cognitive dissonance as well. But then I guess we also have a lot of peer influence, I guess, like you said there, kind of coming into play. And I think fortunately and unfortunately, we are pack animals, and you know, at the moment we've got a lot of social media, and I guess social media could play a role in terms of influencing people to be more considered and mindful in their shopping behaviors, and to you know, repair and reuse and recycle and all of these good things if they see people that they look up to, or people that they see as being part of their social in-group doing the same thing. Because we, like I said, we're pack animals, and you're going to follow the pack. And also we look at these people online, unfortunately, who, you know, if they've got lots of followers and they've got loads of comments and lots of likes, it means that what they are saying is being heavily endorsed. So I guess if we're able to make use of that in a way as well, and also to empathize with people and understand that often when they're shopping in this mindless way, that again, they're following the kind of peer influence, that this is just what we have done for so long, that there's kind of following. But I think we could really lean on social media a little bit for helping us to shift that narrative.
Deanna, I feel like I want to sit in on your class, is what I mean.
Oh.
But it's so fascinating because we think about social media almost like as a weapon right now to get people to buy into fast fashion. And you said like the buses and the advertisements, but can we use that weapon for good is also kind of what I'm getting at, where there's like an optimistic viewpoint of when the pendulum swings and people start really, I mean, people are starting right now shouting about the woes of fast fashion and the sustainable practices they're engaging in. That's why resale is taking off so incredibly fast right now. I just wonder when it's going to shift enough to where there is enough peer pressure through social media through this weapon that we've created to use it for greater good, to actually get people to buy into more sustainable brands and practices. It's fascinating. I wonder when that's going to happen.
Hopefully soon. I mean, I definitely see some shifts when you're looking on social media and things that are happening on Instagram and TikTok. There are definitely trends coming up. And again, as Chloe said, the consumer base for that is so young that maybe it's sort of like bubbling up from the bottom, and it will work its way up. So let's hope. But Jake, you mentioned before about scaling business models. Do you think that companies are going to be able to work up to like a 50-50 split, or do you see it leveling off at some point for resale and other kinds of programs for businesses?
And I think there are so many factors that go into answering that specific question when it comes to like, are we going to get to a 50-50 split? I mean, we're seeing brands like Thousand Fell that have almost 50% take back rate. Is that what you mentioned, Chloe? Which is amazing, but everything that you've built at that company has been around this circular model. And so you were a circular, model from the very inception of the company. I think getting to 50-50 for a brand is going to be incredibly difficult. With that said, we're seeing increases all the time, and the pace of resale is growing at this insane pace. It's growing 11 times faster than retail. It's on track to double fast fashion in the next 5 years. And so as more consumers are looking for resale choices, brands that are offering resale will naturally sell more of those items. And as brands start to embrace resale more and more, the percentage of sales of their overall sales will naturally increase. And like Kathleen said, more customers are demanding brands to actually have resale offerings, which shows that they want to be buying those units from the brands. And as the brands adopt those models and actually really fully embrace them, Kathleen mentioned earlier, or actually Chloe mentioned, which was, all right, how do you have a brand that has resale or recycle and then actually get them to participate? So as we can show what resale can do for brands over time, and as they start to enact practices to get their communities to participate more, they'll be able to reap the benefits more, which will increase the percentage of sales. Maybe not all the way to 50-50, but it's certainly a lot. I know that was kind of a roundabout answer, because it also really depends on the brand and what you're selling and how long the brand has been around and your propensity to even reach the customers. Resale, take back, recycling works best for brands that can actually talk to their customers versus the wholesale brands. There's a lot of brands that sell into Nordstrom, right, or Macy's, or do a lot of wholesale, whereas the best brands nowadays that have the best chance of really adopting resale models are the ones that are more D2C, that have an arm to actually speak to their customers and email them 6 months, a year, 2 years after they bought an item, and get them to resell it through their loyalty program and through their resale program. So I'm really optimistic that the percentage of resale will increase over time to be very substantial, but we are still in the early days of actually proving that out.
And those D2C brands can also use social media and those channels to, put out these good messages and use it as a force for good instead of a weapon, as it sometimes is now. So, so for all of you, I believe that you are working on a new partnership that you wanted to tell us a little bit about today. If you want to go ahead, Jake or Chloe or Kathleen, anyone?
It's very exciting. Actually the three of us, so Treet, Super Circle, and Tentree are announcing a partnership with working together towards creating a fully holistic resale and recycle solution for Tentree. But maybe Kathleen would be the best to talk about it as the brand herself. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm so excited. And we did about 6 months of research actually to look into, we were working with the University of Pennsylvania Wharton, looking at all the options that were available in the market. And I happened to be on a panel with Chloe actually, and she was talking about circularity. And one of the issues that we'd faced is, how do we get economies of scale? Like, how do we make this a solution? How do we recycle, and what options are out there? And to Jake's point earlier, you need to ultimately keep everything in circulation. And so the first point of call is, we want people to reuse Tentree items, but if they can't be reused, we want to recycle them. And I know a lot of brands have been offering, 2 options where the customer is led to think about what do I do? Do I recycle it or do I resell it? And what we really wanted to do, and I think this is what's really exciting about this partnership, is we all came together to create one seamless solution whereby, you know, a customer can just send in an item, and then through the Super Circle Treet partnership, it goes through different paths to resell or recycle. And I think I want to pass on to Super Circle and Chloe and Stuart to talk about the really exciting data-driven methodology that you have, because I think, you know, having the ability to know exactly everything that is happening and to provide that impact to the consumer is one of the differentiating factors of having such an impressive recycle system. Chloe?
Totally. We haven't really talked about it so much on this panel yet, but Rana gave us a nice intro at the beginning. But we're semi in stealth mode. We're just about to launch next month. This is great. This is an insider.
Not stealth anymore.
Not stealth anymore.
The worst kept secret ever.
So Super Circle, so 1000 Fell is this, you know, as we've been talking about on the panel, circular sneaker brand. But to build 1000 Fell, and basically the reason for building 1000 Fell was to try to build what we were calling the full engine to power the circular economy. I was at Gap for 5 years prior. Stuart was setting up supply chains for other brands in Asia, and we knew really quickly when looking into recycling exactly what Kathleen found out with Wharton. The problem with recycling is scale and aggregation cross-brand. And, you know, there are recycling systems, particularly mechanical recycling systems, live at scale in the US and in the West today, but they really require enough of a like fiber, and they require enough of tonnage waste to be prepped and treated to actually engage with those systems. And then the second biggest problem with recycling is the cost of take back and shipping and logistics. When you think about recycling, you know, something like resale that has really high margins because you're reselling a product and there's more profit within that. Recycling is expensive, or it's not really expensive, but it's expensive in such that you're not making a lot of money back. And you're definitely not making enough money back to account for the cost of shipping and logistics for take back. And so what we've been building is a system where we can actually take back cross-brand and aggregate through slower shipping mechanisms to really drop the cost. And what Kathleen is talking about is we've been doing a lot of work with groups, including Textile Exchange, Accelerating Circularity, and a couple of other advisors to really work through LCA data that can be shared cross-brand on the actual like carbon and diversion rate percentages from landfill for recycling. So we're trying to take back as much as possible across as many brands as possible and push as much of that fiber through fiber to fiber recycling systems. The next step through downcycling, and whatever can't go through downcycling, a small percent will go waste to energy. But really being able to map what a brand's assortment, map what gets taken back, and report back on the carbon impact. And then, as Kathleen mentioned, help brands and work with brands over time in this kind of cross-brand system. All early brands this year actually joining a council to help drive this system forward and kind of set targets and goals together for how brands can design products in the future that can be better recycled. But it was also important to us that recycling isn't just like an end all or catch all that makes it okay to just consume, and that we're not recycling items that still have value and could be resold. Right. So we came to Jake, and we are looking to really partner deeply with resale companies. And, you know, how can we encourage brands to not stand up just recycling programs, but joint recycling and resale programs. So the items that can be resold, get resold. Anything that can't get resold for whatever reason, it's too damaged or too pilled or whatever, and goes through recycling. So that's like the high level overview, and that's Super Circle. And we're really excited to be standing this up alongside Jake and Kathleen. I think it'll be, you know, a pretty exciting summer.
And I think your warehouses are really close, right? So you can just hand over across the road to Treet. So we're saving a lot of LCA and greenhouse gases there.
Yeah, that's right. It's so interesting, and kind of the thing that we're really excited about is in working closely with Jake and his team, we're able to kind of have that behind the curtain solution for the pass off of product and be able to work really seamlessly together on that. And that's like a tech solution to make it really easy and automated, but then that's also like an actual physical logistics solution. And so what we also wanted to avoid, and what was really nice to align with Jake on, is that we're not like pinging items all over the country and kind of swapping back and forth. It's all very aggregated, which is really great.
Yeah, what we found in the past year in talking with brands is it's kind of a mess to figure out how to work with a recycling partner, a resale partner, a carbon partner, and all these different things and how they all connect together. And what they were asking for from us was, can we just go to you for one thing and help us with circularity, right? And so the answer is, well, no, we focus on resale. We are amazing at resale. We've built an incredible resale platform that helps brands do resale. Recycling is a whole other business, but if we can partner and integrate really, really well with recycling organizations and platforms like Super Circle, then we can offer a single solution for brands to go to one place to actually meet their recycling and resale needs. And that's why this is so exciting. Because really it's how we can have an out-of-box solution for any brand to be able to do something like this.
It's really great that you guys have actually come together to work, because you could, easily be competitors and really work together, drive down on the data and the technology to make these kinds of things happen. It's, quite exciting for you guys. So, and then just kind of to wrap up, maybe for Dr. Dion or for all of you, is it really just about taking that friction out, which you guys are doing with this program for the consumer, so they are aware that they don't have to really be super active about it, and get them into that circular behavior? Because as Dr. Dion, you said, people are creatures of habit and they don't necessarily like change. So is this sort of the way forward?
I think so, to an extent. And I think there's something about, and like the work you're all doing here, it sounds so joyful and like really positive. And I think making use of those really positive messages, because we think about why people shop. Often people shop to make themselves feel good. Make themselves feel good, to give themselves a little boost, to get those hormone releases. There's a treat, or that's your company, as all these as for all these reasons. And I think sometimes when people think about circularity and sustainability, they think about the more negative messages. I think, oh, they're trying to make me feel bad, or I'm being penalized, or I have to give up something in order to do this. And we don't want people to feel like they're being sanctioned. So I think if we keep promoting these positive messages and creating these really fantastic brands where people don't feel they're having to sacrifice in order to still do something better, then I think that's a way forward to break the habit. Because with most habits, what people do is they don't just stop doing the thing, they kind of transition. So like if you're a smoker, for instance, and you kind of have that kind of oral fixation, you'll swap to something else, like an e-cigarette, to have that same action. It's the same thing, I think, with kind of like less unhealthy kind of consumerism, kind of moving across. Essentially, we do want people to buy less stuff and to resell it, to mend it. But at first, people want to still get that little hit, and they still want to kind of like engage in what they call retail therapy. So I think as long as they feel like they're still able to have fun with shopping and to not have to sacrifice and still get good quality stuff, that will be a good first step to breaking the habit, and then kind of slowing down their pace as they go. So I think it's like a transition, what needs to happen.
So it's about keeping positive messages and working from the back end to make all these changes within a company, and then really present a positive face towards the consumer. And Jake is a great example, because he's so positive about all the opportunities that we have right now, instead of, feeling down, which could be easily happening if you're looking at the news any given day. So it's nice to hear your positivity. I'm really happy for you guys. It sounds like you Chloe and Kathleen, you guys met on a panel and then sort of came out with this great solution in the end. So it's actually really nice to hear about people working together and finding ways that they can, build bridges, I suppose, between your different companies, and really come up with broad solutions.
I think that's a huge learning in the sustainability space, is that we're not going to actually hit targets as an industry unless we work together. And, there are different working groups right now behind the scenes that, even bigger brands are jumping on. I think it's people in it's really driven by people in Kathleen's position, who are kind of outside of, and not Kathleen to say that you're not driving top line revenue and that's not a goal of yours, but who are like outside of the day-to-day biz dev and marketing functions, who are kind of putting that aside and thinking of the larger big picture of the industry. And it's been really, it's really incredible that there are people that have like real power within organizations now that are driving sustainability. even at some of these bigger brands. And because this wouldn't have happened 5 years ago, and wouldn't have been able to happen 5 years ago without people like Kathleen that are kind of, in positions of power now within brands, leading sustainability and CSR, et cetera. So I don't know, Kathleen, what you were going to say, but
I think there's a real opportunity with the circularity partnership opportunity. I think with other issues in sustainability, it might not be the case that, for example, we're looking at living wages at the moment, and you just think, how is this possible without regulation? So hopefully, circularity can be driven from the ground up, that we don't have to force regulations to make things happen, that there are these opportunities for partnership with, all of these organizations like Treet and Super Circle, where we can come together. But with other issues in sustainability, I don't see how we're going to get to them without the sticks. And, maybe we can just use the carrots here and the positivity that Dion was talking to.
We've mentioned this a little bit earlier, but we're now sort of at a watershed moment, and hopefully there is a real opportunity for change right now and make some positive effects that and maybe, these will be great examples to then see how people can work together on other issues if we can do this successfully.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day wherever you are. Bye.
Bye. Bye.